Hello everybody and welcome back to VFR. Today we are here at Grand Canyon National Park and we are going to be taking a look at why you should fly a classic airplane, the Cessna 172 Skyhawk in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Now, in short, the Cessna 172 is one of the most common gateways to flight there is. If you've flown in a GA airplane, a small airplane, there's a good chance it was a 172. I know I have, and I can't say that about a Mooney or a DC-6 or anything like that. Apart from that it's a classic of general aviation, it is a really great airplane to learn the basics of flight. How to do smooth turns, how to navigate, how to land in a more forgiving platform. That's because of a couple key design characteristics. The nice high wing, which is nice and broad, is going to give you a lot of stability, and it kind of hangs you below the wings. And then you also have your tricycle landing gear, so you don't have to worry about bringing gear up and down or anything like that. And it will go very slow, so if you do get too slow, you're not just going to stall out as early. It's also got some really great characteristics for VFR sightseeing, and yeah, it's not just a beginner's plane. There are people who fly Skyhawks all the time. So it's much more than just a beginner plane. It's really a great plane for both learning about and mastering basic flight. So we're going to hop into the cockpit and get set up to... Now we are here at Grand Canyon National Park, and we're basically just going to be flying out over the Grand Canyon and going through a couple of waypoints and coming back. Now, the Skyhawk, as we said, is ubiquitous, introduced in the year 1956, and it's still in production today, despite a brief halt in the 80s. Over 44,000 have been built at this point as of 2021. But it started out life as a couple of different things. Originally there was a two-seat version of the airframe. I can't remember what that was called, but then the Cessna 170 was the next iteration. But the key difference there was it had it was a tail dragger, so it had a wheel in the back and two wheels in the front, instead of the tricycle, which was what made the Cessna 172 the Cessna 172. Now, the Coronado just released a version of the C-170, so if you're interested in taking a look at that, do check that out too. But yeah, that's kind of what that grew out of. And then this airplane in particular is the 172S, which is the current production model. It has 180 horsepower Lycoming piston engine, 640 nautical miles of range, 3,500 foot max ceiling. Microsoft Flight Simulator lists of 14,000 feet, so that gives you a good idea of the range. And we have the glass cockpit version here. There is also, if you get the deluxe version of the sim, it comes with a steam gauge version with analog dials and things like that. If that's what you're interested in, the deluxe version might be for you. I have it, and I do enjoy that version as well. But today we're flying the default 172. So to get us started, Microsoft does have a checklist available, and it's pretty, I don't want to say intense, but it does have a lot of detail in it. But to get us going, we're going to arm the standby battery, and we'll turn the Alt and Bat Masters on, and then we will make sure that we bring in the mixture and bring our throttle up a bit. Make sure you have a fuel tank selected, and we're going to go ahead and start the engine. So you turn your beacon on, and then you can just use the mouse wheel to rotate this to all the way to the right to start. Now be ready to get on the brake just in case you turn your parking brake off. I'm going to bring the throttle back to 1,000 RPM or so. And at this point we can hit these two white switches, and that'll turn on our MFD. So we're holding at about 1,000 RPM. Now, today we're really doing a very simple route. There's two waypoints programmed in. If we come down here and zoom out a little bit, we're going to go out to Cliff, come back around to Dozit, and then we'll be coming back for the airport. So not too bad. It's going to be about an hour flight, but we'll experiment a little bit with some of the maneuvers you can do in this plane. So I'm going to taxi out to the runway, and we will talk through the takeoff. All right, so we are here holding short of runway 21. Looking at the windsock is how we figured that out. It's kind of pointing this way, so we're going to go ahead and taxi on out to the runway and get started. Take the parking brake off, give it a little bit of throttle. So we're first going to be flying, basically we're going to fly off the runway, turn around, and fly back out towards Cliff. We'll go out as long as we want to, and then we'll turn in towards the second waypoint, which I believe is Dozer. And basically we're going to hold on the brakes, increase the throttle gradually, bring it up to full power, release, and then we'll be rotating around 55 knots. We'll be just pulling back on the throttle, or pulling back on the stick at 55 knots. When we see the ticker here on the left, go to 55, and then we will climb out we'll be shooting for about 70 knots for the climb out. So we're going to go give it power and release. And the nice thing about this one, and why it's a good plane to experiment with and learn stuff on, is that we're not going to need nearly this whole runway. And you really can just give it full power and ride. I'm giving a little bit of rudder to stay on the center line. That's 50 knots. 55, we're just going to pull back on the stick. And we are on our way, so we're going to bring the nose back until we're hitting around 70 knots. And while it is very stable, on the takeoff roll and on takeoff, we're ahead and give it a fair amount of rudder just to keep it stable, or to keep it straight. It is a small, light airplane, so it will get bounced around a bit. We're going to start a left-handed turn to go around. Level off and continue to climb out until I don't know how high we're going to go, maybe 8,500, 9,000 feet. And at this point I'm really not using very much stick. I can take my hand off the stick, and that's one good thing to practice, especially if you're starting out, is practicing trimming out the airplane. So using your trim up and trim down buttons. Try and get it so that you don't really have to be holding on to it. If you don't have a button assigned, there's also the wheel down here, which actually is the physical control that you would use. Alright, so we're on our way. We're climbing at about 70 knots. And again, you can just see the nice thing about the high wing. It's not going to be as snappy or maneuverable, but we're still pretty light. And it gives you really great views out the sides. Plus, it operates at that level where I think Microsoft Flight Simulator really shines. Alright, so we're back out here over the canyon, and again, really great VFR platform, especially in this sim. We're going to bring it left and kind of brake back towards our second waypoint. And you're just looking here. The white line, I believe, I'm not sure which way the sim put it in, but the white line's going out to cliff, and then the magenta line is going to be taking us back into the airport as we turn towards it. Another fun thing about this plane is it's really light, and that means we are getting a lot of the, you can feel and see a lot of the bumps from the air and being over these formations. So you are very much more connected with the smaller changes in wind and air pressure than you would be in something like a big lumbering DC-6 or in a fast jet. And we're right around 100 knots, about leveling off. And that's about what we can expect for our top speed. So it gives you that may sound like a negative, especially if you're thinking of cool jets, but really when you're learning, especially when you're learning things like if you wanted to do VATSIM with real people as ATC, or just, you know, learning how to maneuver, how to use the instruments to fly, how to use different navigation aids, that extra time that being a little bit slower gives you can be extremely valuable. And again, that's why this is one of the most preferred trainer platforms in the world. But also for just cruising around for things like aerial photography. It's affordable and it's a great platform for it, relatively. But in this version, we also do have autopilot, so that's good. We can just bang on heading. Can set an altitude hold at 9,000 feet. It's that simple. You can turn flight directors on. It will come in. So you do have that full featured suite. And if you are on PC, there are a lot of mods that really go. Or there's the working title G1000 mod works with this glass cockpit panel as well, which gives you a lot of depth. It adds a lot of depth to the simulation of this system. The 172 also, I believe, has a couple of other modifications people have done that are available for free. So I believe there's a float plane one. I haven't flown it myself, but if you want to go out and do amphibious operations, there is a float plane version available. And I'm not sure, I think there's a Bush tail dragger one too with big tires, so if you want to land in really small backcountry places, you can do that too. So it's a versatile platform, especially for things like that. And then if you're doing any kind of virtual economy things, FS economy, or Neofly or something like that, chances are you could start out with something like a 172. But you got 3 seats plus your own. And if you don't carry people, you can carry some stuff too. So yeah, it's probably not the cargo transport workhorse, but it is kind of a staple of that kind of flying for virtual hire. I'm going to turn the autopilot off now because I do really enjoy just flying this by hand. And we're going to make a left-hand turn to intercept that purple line on our right-hand screen. That'll take us right back to the airfield. And again, yeah, you really can't beat the view. Now, if you like the Cessna, you've flown the Cessna, but you want something a little bit different. You want something similar in role but different. There are quite a few options out there for you. In terms of comparisons, there's one of the modern competitors for this kind of space, the DA40, which we have in Microsoft Flight Simulator as well. We have a glass cockpit version and a steam gauge version with the deluxe edition. You also have the smaller 152, which I believe is the airplane that the tutorial is flown in. That's going to be smaller and less powerful, but it does have kind of default analog gauges. Beechcraft Baron is a single engine plane, but it's going to be faster and a bit more technical, and the same goes for some of the payware airplanes like the Carinata Mooney. If you are on PC and you're looking for payware airplanes, the Just Flight Piper Arrow and Warrior fill a similar niche. These are they're a different design. All these are really different designs. The Cessna is really the only high wing monoplane. The others generally are going to be low wing. But those are kind of your options, and there are a lot of other kind of GA airplanes that fit this niche, but none are quite the 172. And we can see the airport right ahead of us, so I'm going to go ahead and come to our left, and we will enter the base for runway 21, I believe. Go ahead and come back on the power to start descending. Now, one challenge, this isn't without its challenges. One challenge is it's not great visibility on landing. You're not really going to be able to see the runway as well as some other platforms. That's in part because of how it's going to fly, and in part just because of the way it's set up in the tricycle configuration. Send a little bit more, and then we're going to come back to the right. We do have flaps, so we can put out, actually we're good to put out all our flaps. You can extend the main flaps at below 110 knots, and then below 185 knots is going to be your anything greater than that. So we have the field off to our right. We'll give it another knock of flaps. And we should be able to see the flaps too. So you can see your control surfaces, which is helpful. And we'll just begin a nice, gentle turn to the right to line up with the runway. Again, I spent most of the time in full power. It depends on the day. On a nice cold day, you may not need to use quite as much power, but to maintain your speed above 110 knots, you're going to be using quite a bit of power. And there's the runway. go ahead and give it landing flaps, and that should help the nose come up too, and hopefully help us see the runway a little bit better as we come in. Now we are a bit high. We can see that the 4 white lights, ideally we'd have 2 white, 2 red. But that's okay. I know we've got plenty of runway. So just like taking off, you can land in some pretty small fields if you practice and you get good. You can land in soft grass fields. You can do just about anything. And that can be a really fun challenge, trying to get in and out of somewhere pretty tight. So again, while this is a good training airplane, it's not only for beginners, and there is nuance that you can really dig into if you want to operate it in those kind of weird and fun situations. And just like other airplanes with the G1000, we can fly ILS approaches and things like that as well. We can do the more advanced stuff if you want to. Alright, that's 2 white, 2 red. I'm going to give it a little bit more power just so we don't come falling out of the sky. And then once we're over the 2 white blocks, I'm going to cut the power and just let it settle down under the runway. And try to keep the center line. And you're going to need to use some rudder, if you have a twist joystick or pedals. But it should just slow right down. So there you have it. That's really, it is a simple flight, but it is really fun. It can be refreshing if you've been flying complex aircraft for a long time. I absolutely recommend you just take the Cessna out. Take it out, fly around for a little bit, do some maneuvers. You can practice your stall recovery, stuff like that. It is a nice change of pace from those. We have a lot of complex aircraft now available to us in the sim. But sometimes it's nice to kick back and just putter around a little bit. So we'll go ahead and pull up. And just park wherever here. And we'll put the park brake on. So, welcome back. And that's the Cessna, the 172 Skyhawk. It's a really great airplane to find. Beyond just that it's ubiquitous and kind of a classic airplane. That doesn't really even matter to us. It's a great platform. There's a reason for all that. There's a reason why it is as popular as it is. Because it's a great platform to learn about the flight dynamics. It's fun to fly, even if you're not going that fast. And it's stable. But if you want to land at small runways, dirt strips, you can challenge yourself. You can really load yourself up. You can make it a hot day. There's a lot of ways that you can challenge yourself with this airplane. And so, while it's a good platform for learning, it's not solely a beginner airplane. And it's fun to fly, it's fun to land, and these high wings really give you a great view of the world below. And so if you're looking for that, if you're looking for an airplane for that kind of stuff, for sightseeing, especially around specific points, 172 probably your airplane. If you want to look at it as an introduction to some of the procedures of flying VFR or IFR, in the real world, using instruments, wanting to learn how to use things like VORs, navigation aids, and stuff like that. Another great choice for an airplane to do that at. We talked about the comparisons. DA-40 has a very similar role and a very similar philosophy, although it's basically a completely different design. And then you have the Cessna 152 in the default game that's also smaller and less powerful. But it's largely similar. So that's really it. I think it's a fun airplane to fly, and it's been kind of refreshing to take the Cessna back out. So that's it for us today on VFR. Take it easy, everybody.